Welcome to the Hazard Class Podcast. This is the podcast where I get to ask my stupid questions to some of the smartest people in and around the world of emergency services. My guest this week is an accomplished Marine veteran, entrepreneur, and expert in tactical operations and security. He served in the Marine Corps as a scout sniper, chief scout, and a liaison and chief instructor to the FBI Hostage Rescue Team Sniper Course. He did contract work with Blackwater and even with the CIA. He has deployments in Afghanistan, Iraq, Israel, and Bahrain. He is the founder and owner of 102250, which provides tactical and security consultation to the U.S. government, DoD, and law enforcement. He is the co-owner of Nomadic Research, which is a lifestyle brand that makes high-quality outdoor products. My guest this week, Dagan Van Oosten. All right, brother, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, bro.
Of course, yeah. I'm super excited to pick your brain. We have a mutual friend that kind of hooked us up, and he's one of my favorite people, so I'm super happy that we're able to make this conversation happen. So, as is the format of the show, we start out the show with our Wheel of Stupid Questions, which is just a reminder that asking questions is good. Even if they're stupid, if you point them at the right people, you can get some pretty good answers. So with that, we'll bounce into that segment, see where the wheel takes us today, and then we'll get into the actual conversation. Ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, so...
Spin that wheel of stupid questions.
Okay, let's spin the wheel and see where. There's a couple on here that I'm hoping we kind of go to. Oh, this is probably a perfect one for you. What is your zombie apocalypse plan? Right? Do you have the dig out? Like what happens if the world goes crazy?
Yeah, shelter in place and defend as much as possible. That's a great question. Are we talking about the zombie apocalypse or COVID? I think I was kind of prepared for both, right?
One and the same, I think maybe.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm definitely prepared to shelter in place if need be.
Yeah, hold down the fort. You're not going to go take over a local shopping center like it seems to be the thing in every movie?
Well, I guess if I was, I wouldn't broadcast it.
There you go. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Keep it tight to the vest.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk origin story. How do you get started in the military? What's the motivations?
Big family presence, lots of family members on my dad's side in the Marine Corps. One Army here, a few Navy there, but mostly Marines, and so kind of grew up with it as a big part of the family. And it was never really a question. I mean, I wanted to do it, and the influence was always there around me. So that's just what I did, and I'm glad I did.
When you went into the Marine Corps, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do, or did that kind of you follow the like water?
No, I definitely had an idea, growing up with the G.I. Joe and the Rambo. I mean, even though he was a Green Beret, I wanted to do all of it, I wanted to be on the ground. I wanted to do something, special, or Airfinger's quote, elite, if you will. And the sniper reconnaissance, fast company, stuff like that, kind of, anything that gave me additional responsibilities and a lot of weight in the pack, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So for sake of reference, when did you enlist?
Delayed entry program when I was a senior in high school. Gosh, I don't know. 98 was when I was standing on the yellow footprints.
Okay. So then that would mean very early in your career, 9/11 happened. We went from peacetime to wartime. How did that shift your service career?
I mean, obviously, I think like everybody else, that was the start of something, little did we know it was going to be 2 decades long or what have you. And if anybody that served in peacetime can kind of relate to this, obviously, it's always practice. And everyone's just waiting, everybody wants to play in an actual game. And so very much mixed feelings. Obviously, when we saw the towers fell, a lot of excitement, but then at the same time, a lot of levity as far as, okay, here we go. You ask for it, you're probably going to get everything you ask for and more, right? So yeah, it's obviously took a hard right-hand turn from practice to for realsies.
Then how long after the attacks of 9/11 are you actually seeing, a deployment where you're overseas?
It's a great question because it took a minute, and if my younger self was here, I was pretty upset about it. Obviously, Afghanistan kicked off first in 1st Battalion 5th Marines, which is who I was a part of, was not on that initial Afghanistan push, so it was a lot of kind of sit around and wait and make battle plans for things that, from the top down, we weren't sure what we were going to be doing. I was fortunate enough to be the chief scout of 1-5 snipers at the time. So I got to sit in a lot of the battalion, what ifing is the best way I could put it. There was plans to go to Tajikistan on some counter narcotic stuff, sky's the limit until we just, figured out that we were going to be part of the initial push into Iraq.
So then you finally get the orders. All right, we're going to Iraq. What's the atmosphere like? Like what being a firefighter, non-military, right? I have military in the family, all Marines actually. But what's the atmosphere in that room like? In the process of getting there, what are these young Marines feeling, thinking?
Yeah, well, I think probably a myriad of emotions. Obviously there's a lot of excitement, and who knows how much of that excitement was kind of false bravado, or because obviously there's a lot of fear and anxiety as well. That good kind of anxious fear, you know what I mean? I didn't see there definitely in my state platoon, there was definitely kind of no hesitation. In fact, I can remember having a conversation with my platoon sergeant before we actually crossed the LOD and conducted the invasion. Prior to that, he was like, hey, you need to let the guys know that the chaplain is available if they feel or need, they want to talk to the chaplain. And especially once we kind of start going. And I kind of looked at him strange and said, I don't think that's gonna be a factor. In fact, I think you're gonna have to hold these guys back, not push them forward, and that was definitely the case.
So, coming from a Marine family, it's like all Marines are hard chargers. Like they all want to be there, want to be doing it. What's different when you think about these more, elite military units? When you think of working with like the hostage rescue team and the recon Marines? Is there a similarity in these units of people? I guess getting down to the heart of the question is like, are these warfighters born or are they built? Or is it a combination of the two?
I do think it's a combination of the two. And, everybody starts off, kind of as a basic infantryman, and I'll speak Marine Corps specifically. You have to be a good, solid, proficient infantryman first before you can kind of, move on to these other units, or at least try out for these other units. But the foundation is 100% your basic infantry tactics, because at the end of the day, that's what everything revolves around. And so I don't want to say that there is absolutely zero difference, in my opinion, between, a good, solid, infantryman and then someone who is in your reconnaissance or your sniper platoons. The difference is they've mastered one set of skills and then they're hungry to master another set of skills and another set of skills. And, but at the end of the day, a person that is, proficient in basic infantry tactics, there's plenty of guys that are completely happy staying where they're at in the infantry. And let's face it, everybody supports the infantry. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves of that. And but those are the guys that do 90% of the work. And we quickly, become a supporting asset to those guys. And so bred and born and trained, you know what I'm saying? I kind of think all of the above.
Mm-hmm. So now you're in country, right? We go back to that, you guys getting to your first deployment. How was actual combat? How was actual war different or similar to what you thought it would be going into it, being from a military family, all these things. Now you're actually there, the bullets are flying, like, especially coming from a non-veteran, like, what's that experience like? How is it different or similar to what you expected it to be?
I think it's safe to say for everyone, if they're telling the truth, it's pretty surreal. You can play that movie in your head, you know, and I had, you know, 2.5, 3 years of peacetime training where I was playing different movies in my head about what it would be like for real. And in those first initial moments, you definitely have kind of that, I hate to be cliche, but kind of that opening scene of Saving Private Ryan where Tom Hanks is kind of sitting there for a minute. Everything's kind of quiet. There's chaos going on around him, but he's kind of like having his moment and grabbing his bearings and then switching back into real time. It was very surreal, kind of very eye-opening, eyes wide open, like, holy shit, you know, it's a two-way range now, and then you quickly don't have time to think about it. You just have to get back to the job that needs to be done.
Does it ever like shift gears where it's not a wild thing to be doing? Like, did you ever like shift into, we're like, well, we're just going to like do the thing that we do today and not have it be like, holy shit, you know, we're going to shoot guns at each other?
Yeah, I think it quickly becomes that. And I obviously can't speak for everybody, but for me, like I'll just call it like the first night. The first night was pretty surreal. But when the sun rose the next day and that initial kind of shock and awe, you kind of process that. Then it just became one day to the next, one target to the next, or one operation to the next. Because quite frankly, you were singularly focused and you didn't really have time to sit back and revel in the, you know, most of that thought process comes afterwards, unfortunately, right? During the decompression or your downtime or your, you know, off deployment cycle. So I hope I'm answering that question. Yeah, no. It became very, very normal, very, very quick because you obviously didn't have a choice. That just was your new normal.
What are like, this might be a dumb question, like what are like the logistics of being deployed? Like, are you like, I just don't understand, like, I just am so removed from the world that I can't even imagine. Like, so you get up obviously in the morning, you have to like, you know, you're having breakfast, then you're going on out, you know, to do.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, what's that actually look like?
Not a dumb question at all, right? Yeah, so once you're forward deployed and depending on how you're operating, like I'll use the invasion as an example. We initially started out in tents, or we initially started out in holes in the ground that we dug because we had to wait for the logistics train to show up with the tents and whatnot. Then it was tense, and like you said, there's times for chow. So you wake up, you go and eat, and, you know, and during that time, you're basically fighting the boredom. So there's a little bit of training. There's a lot of guys playing cards. You know, you're going to briefings depending on, you know, who you are and what your billet is. You're definitely finding ways to, you know, keep yourself busy. And then once we crossed the line of departure, every day was the same and every day was different in the same effect, right? You ate when you got a chance, you slept when you got a chance. It didn't matter what time either of those things took place. And you were definitely dependent on the logistical support of Marines that do that for a living, right? So I can remember one time in particular where we had kind of outpaced our logistical train. And so they basically passed a message over, you know, the battalion net, like, hey, we're down to 1 MRE a day, guys, because the chow's way back there and we're up front. So, you know, ration your stuff because we don't know when we're going to get more. Wow. You know, so you just kind of, and then you just roll with that, you know, that's just, once again, okay, roger that, nothing I can do about it, you know. And those MREs are designed to sustain you for, you know, days at a time anyways, in my opinion. So, you know, only the chow hounds were hurting when they heard that come over the radio.
So let's go back to this. Like I said, as someone who grew up with MREs, because my brothers would always bring them home. What's your favorite flavor MRE? Do you have one, or do you hate them all now?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. Now I definitely, only if I have to. At the time, because they're constantly kind of changing the menu. And it's crazy how just little things like that can be, what do I want to say, like huge victories. So they had come out with the time it was brand new. They had a cheeseburger MRE.
I was literally just going to say cheeseburger macaroni was the one that I used to always eat when I was a kid. It's probably about the same era.
Yeah. There was a couple that I was accustomed to. We had one that was called the Five Fingers of Death. It was basically like 4 or 5 hot dogs, in a package. I was a real picky eater, so I was forced to, I would either get the one I wanted or I would just go hungry. Lots of crackers and lots of peanut butter for me.
What a time to be a picky eater. You're committed to the bit if you're going to be picky in a war zone.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
So let's go backwards a little bit and talk more about that, like your sniper training. Did you grow up like shooting guns a lot? Like, did you come in as a pretty proficient shooter into the Marines?
So my father was in the Marine Corps, and one of the earliest memories I have is him kind of taking me through the basic, shooting positions. And it was, a triggered memory once I actually got into boot camp, and he would say, this is exactly how they're going to teach you how to do it. He goes, but words to the wise, do whatever they tell you. They know what they're doing. And if it's different from what I said, do what they say. Don't pay attention to me. But as for right now, he's like, I'm going to teach you how to put the bullets on target.
So how long is that process going from like, infantryman to scout sniper, in that like, training pipeline where you go from, being able to put, bullets on paper at, X distance to now you're going out way, way farther than that?
Yeah, so it's a roughly a 10-week school, or at the time, it has changed over time, and like right now, obviously in recent history, they've kind of gotten rid of the division level or the battalion level schoolhouses, but basically you would show up, in a nutshell, it was 5 weeks of fieldcraft. So that was all your patrolling, your camouflage, your psychology and techniques of observation, and then that was 5 weeks of that, and then 5 weeks of your marksmanship training, where they focused on known distance, obviously flat range shooting, 0 to 1,000 yards, learning how to read wind, obviously trusting your spotter was a major portion of it, and they would intermix those. So kind of in a nutshell, and it depended on where you went. I went through First MARDIV, 1st Marine Division Scout Sniper Basic Course, and then I ended up teaching at Quantico. Same curriculum, slightly different approaches. So let's say we would shoot, 100 to 500 yards in the morning, and in the afternoon it would be all field skills, camouflage, patrolling, stalking, and so on and so forth, right? So as much as they could jam pack into that school to make you proficient on the back end, right?
So you were an instructor both in the Marine Corps, and then you also taught or instructed at the FBI in Quantico. If you think about, just generalized like shooting advice, like I just bought a new rifle. I'm excited to shoot it. I really want to take it out far. What are some like things that you could boil down shooting to that could be helpful for like the average person that wants to do better than what they do right now?
So I would say consistency and a strict adherence to kind of the basics. So lots of guys want to jump. In other words, I'll sum it up. If I can put you on target consistently at 100, those fundamentals still, every single one of those fundamentals still apply back at distance, depending on what you're shooting and what that distance is. There's kind of a saying like, everything matters, but it doesn't matter all the time. And as we learn, and as I say, as the technology and the knowledge kind of grows, there were things that we were kind of getting away with back when I was going through, that you would kind of never, or now that we saw that we kind of, man, I can't believe we got away with doing it the way we got, that we did. So I would say a strict adherence to the fundamentals of marksmanship, which is sight alignment, sight picture, body position, slow, steady, manipulation of the trigger without disturbing sight alignment, sight picture. If you can do that consistently, everything else is kind of the wind and the math. Right. And knowing what matters when it matters, sniping, and moreover, the study of ballistics, that is a rabbit hole that, is just theoretically endless. And it's, once again, kind of knowing what matters when it matters, and that's when you kind of really kind of hit your stride as an effective sniper.
So now I'm going to bounce back from training out back to now you being overseas. So now you settle into that first combat deployment, and you are, getting used to, the rotation of things and stuff. What is it about that environment, about that, I don't know if you want to say shared trauma or hardship, that seems to bond people? And then in the experience of people I know that have been overseas, almost eventually becomes romanticized in retrospect of like, those were the days in a weirdest way. Why would it be that some of the hardest days of a human being's life in retrospect becomes romanticized?
Oh yeah, that's an excellent question, and I think, obviously the world according to me, I think that you look back at in fondness, not only, so obviously shared suffering, shared hardship, shared fear, and obviously all the laughs that go along with it, because everything is kind of the pendulum kind of swings violently. 1 second you're laughing and joking, and the next minute it's the worst 30 seconds or 10 minutes or 2 hours of your life, whatever, whatever the situation may be. But I think the reason why we look back in fondness, and I'm speaking for myself, is all I had to worry about was the task at hand and taking care of my guys. So I wasn't worried about a cell phone. I wasn't worried about an email. I wasn't worried about all of the kind of the trivial things that that kind of interject or that swarm our lives now. Like, don't get your guys killed. Try not to get yourself killed. Take care of your guys and accomplish the mission. The end. I'll worry about chow, sleep, and trying to clean myself or get a shower or some, all of that stuff is secondary. So you're just kind of singularly focused, and it's a very simplistic way to live. And I know that kind of sounds weird when I say it out loud, but that would be my answer to that question.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, that does seem to be a through line for some reason, whatever reason. It seems to be almost universally. You talk to people that have done combat deployments, and they have this romanticized retrospect. So it's interesting to hear your perspective on why that might be. So your first deployment, you said, was in Iraq. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, first combat deployment.
First combat. And so then, how many combat or overseas deployments did you do while you were in versus when you were contracting?
So so my very first deployment ever, let's see if I can remember them in order, not that there's like a million of them. Bahrain was my first one with Fast Company, which was a fantastic deployment, but by no means a combat deployment. We did a lot of cool operations, got tasked with a lot of cool stuff. My second deployment was on a ship, Okinawa. They call it the 31st MEU. I did one of those. Then it was the Iraq invasion. Then after Iraq, I did another 31st MEU over to Okinawa and Australia and those, to the Philippines and all those places. And then I got out, not counting I did a stateside deployment with Fast Company in Washington, which was like a 2-monther up to Washington State. But yeah, overseas deployments, those would be it. Excuse me. And then once I started contracting, I just did 90-day rotations, 90 on, 30 off, for like 5 years straight.
Wow. So when you decided to formally leave the military and move into the contracting world, what was that decision like?
So I had kind of promoted myself out of what I would consider what I wanted to do, which was to be a team leader and kind of be on the ground. Every job has a series of ranks, and once you rank yourself out, like, basically, I was staring Gunny at the face. I had gotten selected for Gunny, although I didn't pin it on. And that's a, company Gunny, or an ops chief or so on. It just depends, right? And that's a lot more desk work and a lot more administrative work. You're now focused on making sure the guys are supported, making sure that their training is facilitated, and at the end of the day, it kind of meant a desk, and I didn't think I was ready for a desk just then. And I had kind of checked all the boxes that I wanted to or was able to in the Marine Corps. And so it was kind of an easy decision. Okay, I've done everything kind of that I can or want to do. It's time to try something different.
So then you get out, obviously with a resume like you had, you're able to get hired by one of these contracting companies. How do those, deployments differ from working for the government? Like, is it vastly different? Is it like fast and loose? Is it more rigorous? Whatever it might be. How is it different?
So living conditions, depending on where you're at, were vastly improved, dramatically improved living conditions. We were by no means roughing it. I'm not saying there wasn't certain, times and locations where you might have been the first person on the ground in said location. Mm-hmm. And that might be getting more towards reminiscent of the days of filling sandbags and kind of starting someplace from scratch. But that few and far between, it quickly went from, I don't care if I get a shower to my T-bone's been overcooked again, and, so we got spoiled very, very quickly. And anyone that's done that, the contracts like that, they will attest. And if they're telling you anything different, they're probably stretching the truth a little bit. So
how do those work from a logistics perspective? You're still working under some military arm, right? Are you getting tasked by them, or who's assigning your roles and tasks in that scenario?
So it vastly depends on the contract and who that contract is supporting. So whether it's a State Department contract or, and predominantly State Department contracts where you're facilitating the Department of State to function wherever they're at, right? So anything that will facilitate the Department of State or any of the other government entities, your three-letter organizations, you're there to ensure not only their safety, but you're kind of a jack of all trades, and possibly master of some as well, depending on, who you're surrounded by, right? So I guess the best way I can describe it is for us, you had a lot of high level or high intellect individuals that maybe weren't used to operating in those austere environments. And so it was almost a necessity to have military guys in the mix so that we could ensure not only their safety, but we could go out and do things that obviously they weren't trained, prepared, or equipped to do. So in a lot of those roles, you're operating more or less as personal security details, or are you out actually doing ops? It can be both. And once again, it's and I'm not trying to sound vague intentionally. No, it's just such a wide spectrum of, every day, every operation, every kind of scenario in place that you find yourself in is kind of gonna. I always like to say, every circus has its own act. Mm-hmm. So the things that I did in Kabul, Afghanistan were vastly different from the things I did in, say, Jerusalem or in Israel. The way we operated in, Jalalabad was obviously a lot different than how we operated in, say, Herat or, Asadabad. Mm-hmm. One of them was very paramilitary, helmets, flak jackets, nods, platoons of Indage, and the other one was very, MacGyver, you may be lucky if you're allowed to carry a pistol. So it's kind of like, a pack of gum, a pack of smokes, and a bad attitude, and let's get this done, right? but the environment kind of fit the profile, if that makes sense. I should say the profile fit the environment. It was a better way to put that.
Yeah, no. And so as you're going through that process, how do you maintain a life when you're gone for 4 months or 3 months, back for a month, and you did that for, you said, 5 years?
Yeah, it was a better part of it. Yeah.
How were you able to? It had to have been just incredibly hard. Were you married at the time? Were you like how? Man, I think it's bad enough with my wife that I'm gone a third of the time, a third of the month. But good for her, man. Holy cow.
Yeah, and her being, yeah, she's obviously, I can't say enough good things about her. Obviously, we've been married for going on 25. I think this year will be our 26th. She'll check my math when she hears this, I'm sure. But yeah, she obviously, her being she was in the Marines as well. We kind of, she went in a year ahead of me, and she's a very, very, she's cut from a different cloth because obviously the divorce rate is very high. And to go back to a simple answer to your question, how do you maintain your life? You don't. That just quickly becomes, when you're somewhere else more than your home, then that somewhere else just becomes that's home, right? Mm-hmm. And that happened very, very quickly. And I'm not proud of it. I'm not saying that's the right answer, but that it does definitely, it's very, very difficult to maintain any resemblance of normalcy when the op tempo or when you're gone that often.
Wow. So then do you start your consulting company while you're contracting, or is that post contracting?
So no, basically once I stopped deploying overseas and started, teaching and instructing and consulting on the regular, that's when I decided to incorporate and form my own company, 102250. And it's, it was a way to obviously keep me occupied when my primary focus wasn't, my primary job. And, because you always have to, and every guy that's ever contracted, whether it be for a year or, 10, I think I'm going on like 16 or something, I started in 2009, once again, check my math, but, there has to be an end state. You have to have some sort of an exit strategy, and what better way than to, offer those consulting services or, training opportunities, on the side and kind of treat that as an exit plan instead of doing it as my day job all the time, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
What's the story behind the name?
So 102250 is kind of a tongue-in-cheek. It's the articles that govern the articles of U.S. code that govern conventional, unconventional warfare and espionage.
Okay,
right.
Cool.
So
this is a question that I kind of passed over as we're talking about, war fighting, but I've always questioned this from the outside looking in. The rules of engagement seem like such a bizarre thing to me that we would agree to go to war with an adversary that will not follow the same rules as we do. But despite that, we hold to this line so much so that we send people to prison or for not holding the line, despite our enemy, standing on the same ground, not fighting the same rules. What is a person that's actually been in that arena? What are the thoughts about that? It just seems like a crazy thing from the outside looking in.
I think for me, initially, in the U.S. military does, as they should, and almost it's a necessary evil. They do a very, very good job in your basic training or just your if you're not in combat, then you're in training. And when you're in training, they do a good job of dehumanizing whatever, potential enemy that you will fight, right? And so when I initially got over there, I was like, nothing but obviously hate and disdain for the way they conducted themselves. And that quickly turned into almost like a David and Goliath type of situation where I was like, well, if I was them and I was facing the unsurpassed power of the United States military, I would probably conduct myself the same way. They almost don't, they don't have a choice. As far as their, asymmetric or your guerrilla warfare tactics, your IEDs, that what other choice do they have, right? If that makes sense. Because if they stand toe to toe, it's going to be over with in less than a minute, right? So they're not. We like to say, they may be savage, but they're not unintelligent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you think that, like, operating under military guidelines or rules of engagement, just seeks to level the playing field to some degree, at least that we can have some level of. Do you think it's a moral high ground, or what do you think's the motive? Just be able to say, like, hey, even at war, we're the good guys kind of thing?
I 100% think that, right? And believe it or not, and I don't want to sound too dramatic, but I witnessed it. I felt it. I'm sure other combat veterans would attest. It's very, very easy to lose your humanity. It's very, very easy to kind of lose that aspect of right and wrong, because the bloodlust is very intoxicating. And if you don't, I would not fault anyone for necessarily, maybe doing something that they shouldn't, because in the heat of the moment, it can be crazy, and you can almost, step outside yourself and do things that, that normally when you are of sound mind, that you wouldn't do. So yes, 100%. I think it is an attempt to keep everybody kind of reined in to a certain extent and maintain that kind of moral high ground, because otherwise, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy? Right, in that sense. And to coin a phrase that I like to say a lot, that I stole from one of my very good teammates, at the end of the day, we're the bad guy in somebody else's story.
Yeah, I was just about to ask about that, because I've seen interviews with, like combat veterans, and one in particular that I thought was very interesting, that he talked about, killing this man, and in the process he thought, man, I wonder if we would have met in a different circumstance, if we would have been friends. And here we are, me, and here we are, this guy. We have no idea who each other are. And I just became the villain in his story, in his family story. And under different circumstances, maybe we could have had a beer or whatever. Where does that ring to you as someone that's kind of been there?
I couldn't agree more. You know what I mean? And you have the rest of your life to kind of think about in retrospect, the things that you, were either forced. I don't like to use the word force, because it's an all volunteer force, obviously. We were put in situations, although willingly, we were put in situations to do unfortunate things to, people that, deserved it, didn't deserve it, you name it. It all depends on the situation and the context. But I think it's impossible, unless you're a straight up sociopath, I think it's impossible to have done those things and not think about it in retrospect and wonder, exactly what that individual said. Like, I wonder what it would have been like if we met on the street instead of met in open combat. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. It's you definitely don't have time to think about it then. That all comes when the dust settles, and sometimes doesn't come for very long periods of time afterwards. I didn't really start chewing on my experiences hard from the Iraq invasion until probably 2 or 3 years after I was, an instructor at Quantico. Wow.
So kind of in looking in retrospect of your experience, how has you living the life of a warfighter affected your view on the world in totality?
It can be very cynical, because you kind of get to see behind the curtain with what policymakers say nothing about the mainstream media. There's kind of what we're fed back here, and then there's obviously what's really happening on the ground. And it can be very, very cynical. You can get very, very jaded very, very quickly, because you kind of get to see through the bullshit, and if you let it, that's, I think, a lot of what kind of eats guys alive. It's not so much the experience, although traumatic experiences affect people, differently. Everybody's meter gets pegged kind of at different times, or at different lengths of time, or for different scenarios, different situations. But it's very jaded and very cynical if you let it. It's definitely a constant battle to kind of tune that stuff out and focus on what the good is. And I'll use myself as an example. I made it through all of it, all my fingers, all my toes. That's enough. We chased the dragon, we caught the dragon. I'm very, very fortunate. And so I focus on that, because obviously there are, unfortunately, many, many guys that can't say the same thing. Guys and gals, right?
Yeah. How has it informed your ability to be a husband and a father? with the time away and the time apart and whatnot?
So obviously, in the beginning, I would say it did me no favors. It did me no favors because you're very emotionally withdrawn. There's a lot of anger, right? Anger takes the place of almost all other emotions, and when you're not flat out, running around at a level 9 out of 10, because that's just your normal. To everybody else, you're probably not that pleasant to be around. Very short-tempered, a lot of anxiety. That leads to a lot of the substance abuse and stuff like that. Excessive drinking. And as time goes on and you process those things, if you're able to process those emotions and those events, then I think it brings in a lot of compassion. Or at least for me, it brings in a lot of compassion, and being thankful and attentive and present, once again, focusing on the fact that 5 fingers, 5 toes, eyesight, theoretically unscathed, showing thanks for that by being present and compassionate and loving to those ones that I wasn't that way for so many years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as we kind of start to wrap up here, I want to talk about your company, Nomadic Research. How do you go from that whole experience in life to now being like outdoor life brand?
Well, fantastic question. Well, first and foremost, a teammate of mine from my contracting days, Matt Horton, he was like, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and I want you to be a part of it. And I said, what do you need from me? He's like, I just need you. I said, well, that's easy. No money down, type of deal. And so Matt said, hey, this is what I would like to do. And I think a lot of people that go through, and especially if you're an infantryman or something that has, a field marine or a field soldier or what have you, lots of hunting, lots of fishing, kind of the love for the outdoors. And because it's solace, it's peaceful, it's relaxing, and so we wanted to focus on outdoor adventure and apparel, for people that, patriots that loved America and love the outdoors, hunting, fishing, you name it, extreme sports. And we wanted to outfit them with technical apparel and gear that supported them in that endeavor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it seems to be, as looking through the product lines of it, it seems to be like super high quality stuff. It looks super cool. It looks like it's made with like only the highest quality stuff. What's the process of like learning that? Like, how do you get into manufacturing and design and all these things that you probably didn't do at all, and all of a sudden you're in the deep end of making products and building products and sourcing products and all these things?
Sure. Well, I think as an end user, and obviously I would consider myself an end user, you kind of find people that are smarter than you, kind of like the intro to your podcast. Yeah. You find people that are smarter than you and present them, a problem set, and then a capability that you want your gear or apparel to a standard that you want it to function at, and lean on them hard to come up with an acceptable answer. Mm-hmm. And then obviously we put it through the paces as much as we can, until mm-hmm. we're happy, and probably annoy those people, to the nth degree, wanting to nuke it and make it perfect, or what we consider perfect, and something that we can be proud of and stand behind. Mm-hmm. And I definitely think we've done that. So we definitely leaned on people that was their craft, us being the end users, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. So tell the people where they can find it, where they can see the products. If they want to get one or check one out, something like that, where can they find it?
Sure, I appreciate that. Yeah, so it's obviously www.nomadicresearch.com. You can find everything there. We're on Instagram under the same, and we encourage everybody to give us the Pepsi challenge, if you will, and mm-hmm. We think they'll be happy. We know they'll be happy.
For sure, yeah, and we'll link all that stuff in the description of the video and the audio, so they can easily find it if they want to take a look at it. I just want to say, Dagan, thank you for joining me. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the stories. I appreciate the willingness to talk about the hard things and share your tale. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. It's good to meet you, and hit me up if I can help. I will.
For sure. Thank you so much.